And we went down there because we had a report in San Antonio of a local guy who actually was going to run against the local sheriff in an election. Now, everybody in Floresville in those days was a Democrat. There were no Republicans. This guy happened to be a Republican, and he got about 4 or 5 other people to be Republicans, and he said, I'm going to challenge the sheriff, because they thought he was corrupt and everything else. Well, he challenged him, and he got his butt beat up. I mean, they beat him up good. So we said, we're going to go down there and do the story. So we went down, and here the guy comes out of his house, and he's all bandaged up, but he could walk, and we did a little interview with him. And he said, and that guy across the street is so full of, you know what?
No.
And the guy across the street is John Connolly, the governor.
You're kidding.
That was his house. So I looked at my camera guy and says, we're going over there. So we crossed the street and drove up to the house, and the guy comes to the door, and we told him who we were. And Mrs. Connolly came to the door, and she says, yeah, come on in. The governor's out in the back.
Oh, come on,
Yeah. They invited us in, and we went out to the pool. He's sitting out there with his iced tea, and all that. And, of course, he's all bandaged up. His
from
arm, being shot.
Being shot.
Yeah. And we did a good little interview with him and how he felt. And he, by the way, he also was never convinced that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter. He thought.
Is that right?
Yeah, he thought there could have been somebody else. He never was fully convinced with the Earl Warren report. But the interesting thing, we were talking to him, and he started telling us about his experiences with Lyndon.
Yeah.
And of course, Texans loved John Connolly. He was like, he was a hero. Okay. Lyndon Johnson, on the other hand, nobody liked. And he had that reputation that had followed him around, that the way he got elected to the Senate in the first place was stuffing the ballot box. That just followed. In fact, we did a skit at the San Antonio Press Club where the stage is all bright, sunny day, Mexican music, and here comes Lyndon with his big 10-gallon hat and a serape on himself, celebrating this and that and the other thing. But then he says, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to get these elections. I know I'm close, but I'm not going to be able to get it. And he sits down, puts his sombrero kind of thing down over his face. The lights go down. He's sitting leaning up against a cactus. And the lights go down like he's going to sleep.
Right.
And so we sit there, and the music goes down. And in the darkness on the stage, out comes a ballot box about the size of this table.
Oh, come on.
Just out of the blue, see? And then all of a sudden, here come a bunch of guys dressed up in Mexican clothing. And they've got ballots. And they're putting them in the box.
Yeah.
And he's over there dreaming this, obviously. See?
Right.
And then the lights come up, and he wakes up, and he says, I got it. I know how I'm going to win the election.
No.
He was sitting in the front row with his wife, and John Connolly and his wife were right next to him. Connolly was laughing his head off. Lyndon was just...
Oh, I bet.
He was not happy with that. But that followed him all through his experience in Texas. Yeah. But people just absolutely adore John Connolly. In fact, in Floresville, in the main restaurant in Floresville, there was this huge... You know how in China you would see these pictures of Chairman Mao?
Right.
Well, I had pictures of John Connolly like that in restaurants and everything. John Connolly said, go over to Sam Foer's house, which was in Florida, right in downtown Floresville. Go over and Sam will tell you some stories. I didn't know who Sam Foer was. Well, it turns out he was the lifetime postmaster of the city of San Antonio, which is a big job.
Yeah, sure.
But because he was an associate of Johnson and Connolly, he had that job for life. I don't think he ever went to work, but he was the postmaster. And so we went over to Sam, and we knock on the door, and the lady comes to the door. Yeah, Sam's here. It was a big old house. It was like a ghost house with the plaster and everything was coming apart, but you could see where it had been a grand home at one time. And it was in that house that John Connolly got married, and Lyndon was his best man.
No.
Right there. And Sam came down the stairs in one of those old tank underwear shirts,
You were kidding. The postmaster.
Postmaster.
Yeah.
And the shirt was gray, like he'd been wearing it for about 2 years. And he came down, and he sat down and told us the darndest stories about Lyndon and John Connolly. And We thought it was so good that we pitched it to ABC News, and they took it.
Did they really?
Yeah, they used excerpts of it. So,
wow, Steve, and you were in your early 20s then.
Oh yeah.
This would have been gigantic. Was there anyone? Did you have peers in your age level? I mean,
I don't think so.
Would there have been peers anywhere in the U.S.?
Do you know who was anchoring ABC News at that time? Peter Jennings.
Is that right?
He was only 20. He was my age. He was like 22 years old.
Yeah, sure.
23 years old.
This was in 64.
Right. Ron Cochran was their first anchor there, and then they put on Peter Jennings for about 6 months to a year.
Right.
And then they sent him to London, and I can't remember who followed that. No, I may have been young, but Peter Jennings had the better job.
Oh, a superstar there, yeah.
God bless his soul.
43 years ago, Steve.
Yeah,
Think
it's been a
about
while.
how the time has flown, and of course for you, the experience of having TV, the most powerful medium in the world.
Yeah.
The excitement for you now, and then of course radio, which is TV but without
pictures.
without pictures. That's right. And then print, which is an entirely different medium, but one that you've wrapped around well. And we've got a copy that's one of your old columns, Snippets. Can tell a lot, though I prefer the whole story, which has some great example of, and of course you've done some moving columns as well as stories over the years, and folks can find 8 of your pieces or 7, and you obviously are instrumental in helping keep our editorial focus as an editorial group, our editorial focus every week, but now your pieces in the Business Journal and throughout, good general coverage of the Myrtle Beach area, but your column, Porter's Point, which you've been done. What year did you join the Herald, Steve? Do you remember? Was there?
Yeah. Okay. Let me nail it. I know it was in October of 95.
Is that right? So not long after Debbie had kicked it off in 93 or 4.
A year and a half to 2 years after.
So it was not long after you kicked off the big morning show on W. Was it on RNN back then also?
Oh yeah. But we had hardly any signal at all, and we didn't have any money to make it any better. And so it wasn't until we got bought out 3 times.
Right.
Before we had the money to upgrade the signal to what it is now.
It was 94.5 at one time, and now 99.5.
And now the next media, when they came in, one of the first things they did was move it to 99.5.
Yes.
And we went from an effective radiated power of 1,100 watts to 25,000.
Wow.
So that made a great big difference.
You got listeners all over, to a great degree of even our viewing area. A lot of folks that are far outside, just Horry, but down into Georgetown, up into Brunswick, into Marion, and even in Dillon and other counties.
I got to say, after all those years of working for the networks, being at the White House, traveling around the world, being with the Secretary and the President, doing all the work at the networks, almost 20 years in New York City, anchoring NBC News, the radio network. This here in Myrtle Beach, this experience that I started back in January 2nd of 1995, and then the experience with the radio, with the newspaper, of course, back when we were still using glue and paper to put it together.
I'm glad that was before my time.
Without a doubt, the most fun that I've had in my entire life in terms of a career. One that I feel is, you feel like something is, your work is actually having a result. I'd go to the White House every day. And, of course, my job at the end of the day was to put together a syndicated television piece for NBC early morning, sunrise, and also syndication. And, it was okay. There's a format to that. You do it, you put it together, you get it done, you go out and do your stand-up on the front yard, and you go home, and you walk down the street, and you think to yourself, now, what did I actually do today, and was it worth it? And who's actually going to care? Because it was going out into the ether. And you never got any reaction from anybody, except when you did something stupid. Came down here, I can't lift a finger without somebody yelling at me, or writing a letter, or calling on the radio.
Calling into your radio show,
But you can see the interaction of what a good thing communications is, broadcast and newspaper. And when you're a part of it, you can actually put your hands on it and feel it and see the effect, which you can't when you're working up there in the big time.
So writing for the Herald was the first time you went into newsprint. That was your first.
Yeah, except for a couple of years with the Associated Press.
Right, sure.
But that I didn't write long form for the Associated Press. I wrote short form for broadcast television and radio.
Right.
In fact, many times I heard Tom Brokaw reading my words.
No.
You know, stuff that I had written.
That would feel like you were doing something, even if just making a difference to Tom Brokaw.
Yeah, well, you know how writers are. I mean, they'll take an AP dispatch, and yeah, they'll add a few lines, but basically they just use what AP's written. Why rewrite it, you know?
Steve, I know it's the 4th of July, and we'd love to go on all hour. We've got some car talk show right after us. We've got less than a minute. You know, if there was something, any big piece that really stands out in your mind over your almost now 5 decades almost now?
It'll be 50 years next year.
News reporting next year, 5-0.
Yeah, March 18th of next year.
Anything that just stands out in your mind? Maybe it is just the last decade of really making a difference in a small community.
The one time that I felt I was actually watching history happen, when I was traveling with Secretary of State Baker, and there were just two things that happened. One, when we went into Bulgaria right after the Russians had been run out of there, and they now were facing a new way of living under the so-called democracy. Well, they had no idea what democracy was. And I'm in the hotel as we arrived. I hear this chanting and screaming in the street, and I'm thinking, oh boy, they're coming after us, you know, because only 12 reporters traveled with the secretary. So there were only 12 of us in the hotel, along with the secretary's staff. And I'm thinking, they're gonna crash into this hotel, and we're all done with. See, so I look out the window, and the whole square, as far as I could see, was full of people. And so I thought, well, I got to get the story. So I grabbed my little tape recorder, and I run downstairs and out into the crowd. And I start saying, you know, what's going on? Why? What? The secretary's protected. You're not going to be able to do anything. Or this. I said, oh no, we're happy to have you here. We love you. And they're patting me on the back and shaking my hand. Some people had drawn American flags, because they didn't have any, on pieces of paper, and were trying to wave, you know, the flag. And we got to talking about holding elections and how they were going to do it. They had no conception of how it was going to work. The thing that's hilarious is that George Bush just took a trip over there for the first time.
Is that right?
And he got the same treatment. And it astonished everybody on this side of the ocean, but that's how much they love Americans. Bulgarians, of all people.
That's amazing,
oh,
Steve.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous story. I'm sorry we've run out of time.
That's okay.
So great being with you this morning. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Steve Porter coming up next. A lot of fireworks going off today. Be safe, be happy, enjoy your time on a tremendous Independence Day. Happy 4th of July.